Welcome to the, what is it, May 6th edition of the Lifeboat Academy Coordination Circle. And as is our normal custom, we get started by doing a land acknowledgement and a grounding, and then giving everyone a chance to check in. So in terms of the land acknowledgement, I'm going to try to keep it simple today, and um, a reminder that we start by acknowledging the land as a reminder that the land is what holds us all and connects us all. And when we say the land, we mean more than boundaries on a map. We actually mean all of our relations, all of the interconnected web of being that sustains us and feeds us and provides us with air to breathe. And so we start by acknowledging a land to bring ourselves back to an understanding of how we all fit together. And we do that before we start our work together so that we have a sense of the bigger picture. And in doing so, we are acknowledging the deep wisdom of indigenous cultures, which around the globe have all come to a shared and similar understanding of our relations to each other and to the land. And so we take a moment to express our gratitude to that deep and ancient pool of wisdom. And as a reminder, when it's really easy in these modern times to lose that connection, to bring ourselves back to it. And also as a reminder of that connection is to see ourselves throughout history, to take a moment to think about the people that have cared for and inhabited the land where you are right now for generations and generations. No matter where you are, there have been people on the land for time immemorial. And so by acknowledging our connection to the land, we acknowledge our connection to all the ancestors, to our blood ancestors, and to the ancestors who've cared for the land that we find ourselves on today, and to the ancestors who have kept the wisdom traditions alive and shared them and passed them on. And so I am very happy to say that I am coming from Wasanic territory, a land that I hope to learn to be a good relation and a good neighbor, and to live in right relations with all my relations. And so with that, I invite us all to take a deep breath in, breathe in those connections, and on the exhale, feel the weight of your body pressing down into the space that you are in, onto the chair or whatever is supporting you. And take a moment in your mind's eye to see yourself in the landscape. See the relationship of the room to the building that you're in and the building to the land that you're on. Look in all the directions to the landmarks and the relations that lie in all those directions. And take another deep breath in, drawing from all the directions and all the relations. And on the exhale, just let go anything that keeps you from being present, from showing up, any tightness, any distractions, any heaviness. Just let them melt off of you. Let it return to the land, knowing that the land can take it, transform it, and return it as refreshing, bright energy to us. And take a moment to express your own gratitude to the keepers of the land, to all your relations. And when you are ready, come join us back in the circle. So we'll do a quick check-in, and the circle as I see it is April, Roland, Ronnie, me. And does anyone have a check-in question? I will offer up one, which is, it's just such a beautiful day here today. What is feeling bright with you? So over to you, April. What feels
Sorry,
bright?
could you repeat that again?
What's feeling bright?
Um, what's feeling right around me outside is that there's a lot of bright green stuff, new growth of all kinds, which is of a particular color and very green and very bright. That's what's out there for me today. On to Roland.
The smell of sun on plants and soil. Over to Ronnie.
Oh, I would say connections in my community, um, connections and willingness to show up. It's feeling really bright in my world. Over to Ben.
Yeah, I think spring brings a sense of possibility, and so that's kind of what's feeling bright is um, the literal and the metaphorical buds, and just a sort of we've been talking a lot about curiosity and a sort of just a light curiosity of I wonder what this will turn into. I wonder where this will go. So yeah, that's where I'm at. So we'll go back to the agenda. We've done our grounding and check-in. And the first thing up is to revisit our North Star. Why are we here? Why bother? And I have been taken to kind of explore this from different angles to keep it a little fresh and asking what the Lifeboat Academy isn't. Because sometimes we can get clearer on what something is by peeling away the thing it's similar to not quite. So and take the question that's useful and leave the rest behind and feel free to adapt it. But that my starting question is, in order to understand what the life academy is, we're going, what can we understand that it's not? So April, over to you. What is the Lifeboat Academy not?
It is not something that tells you what to do. Over to Roland.
It is not static. Over to Ronnie.
It's not a cult. It's not. It's not a cult. Over to Ben.
The fact that we feel an impulse to put that in says something. Uh, um, it's not a single thing. It's not an easy single. It's multifaceted. It's not a single thing. And let's go back through the circle. We've each had a chance to share a little something. And so we can go back through thoughts, reactions, elaborations. Back to you, April.
It is not an exclusive house party.
Mm.
Over to Roland.
You're muted.
I just wanted to comment that this is actually a really interesting exercise. It is easy to come with one-liners, what it's not, and there's a whole bunch of them. And the challenge of actually trying to say what it is. So I'm finding that really interesting because my one-liner of what it is not, it's not a free-for-all. Over to Ronnie.
It's not a oh, what is the word for when you go to a web page and then there's a list of all the different.
Oh, like a directory?
Yeah, it's not a directory. Over to bed.
This is kind of fun. It's not another get rich quick scheme. It's not extraction. Over to you, April.
It is not without its responsibilities.
Is that over to me?
Sorry,
Yeah.
yes.
It's not business as usual. Over to Ronnie.
It is not a traditional education. Over to Ben.
It's not always comfortable. April.
It is not hierarchical. Over to Roland.
It's not commune. Over to Ronnie.
Commune, you said?
Commune.
It's not a resort. Over to, but it might be a last resort. Not a resort, but it might be a last resort. Over to Ben.
Yeah, it's not a housing co-op. April? And do we want to just keep going, or when we can wrap it up anytime? Actually, I guess feel free to add, and if you're ready to move on, just indicate that, and otherwise we can keep going.
I'm ready to move on.
Ditto. Over to Ronnie.
Awesome. I got a thumbs up there. Okay, that is fun, isn't it? It's nice to shake things up a little bit. We will review our annual and seasonal plan as we have it written. Actually, one of the things that I wanted to put on the agenda today is it is time for seasonal seasonal review. And so we take a look at this, but knowing that maybe it's time for this to iterate. It's time for it to evolve to the next level. Currently, the guilds have really, I think the first bit of work was getting some sense of what the guilds are working on. And so Heart Work and Philosophy was exploring the deep engagement possibilities. Principles and Governance has been focused on onboarding. Finance is focused on the legal structure and securing the mortgage. Farm, food, and housing generally has, I think we said, is focused on the game plan for the garden and the farm, but is really at this point just pulling together the farm side of things. I think we've anyhow, bringing the attention back to the physical, and outreach and network has been refining the materials and how to communicate that. And I can already see that some of these things have already begun to morph into what is coming next. The annual plan, which is going to be a bit more static, is that we are first and foremost focused on establishing the legal entity and securing the property as the foundation for everything else, and onboarding people that have been showing an interest in getting them up to speed. And then moving through figuring out what our priorities are and thinking of this year as our baseline year. So figuring out how we can set things in place so that we can start to build a sense of change as we're doing it. So once around on where we are in terms of a seasonal plan and an annual plan, again, just to bring us, kind of back to the big picture. So all thoughts are good for the good of the cause are welcome. So over to you, April.
Is this like sort of a progress report?
I think the intention in how it fits into the agenda for the coordination circle is we have the North Star, which is fairly abstract. And then this is to give us the context of how we're setting priorities for coordination. So it's not so much that's more the guild reports. This is really just kind of putting it in context.
Well, I think it's safe to say that we are still learning how to do guild work. And on to Roland.
Yeah, and yeah, I think a lot is still in development, and we're working out how to start doing some concrete things at the same time as we are onboarding and figuring out how to onboard and figuring out how to do guilds and working out how to make meetings more efficient and pleasant. So a lot's going on. Over to Ronnie.
Yeah, ditto what's been said. A lot of laying the groundwork and using the process. Yeah. Over to Ben.
Yeah, and I think, speaking for the process, AIM Act Reflect and the value of, there's of checking in. And I think it's also as a way of working, what we're checking in on is, treating the farm as an organism and sort of looking at how it is naturally developing. We have some role in it, but it's kind of standing back a little bit and saying, oh, it seems to be budding right now, or etc. Giving it its own voice. So that's cool. Does anyone have anything else they want to add, or should we move on? Moving on. All right. Next, we'll go over and we'll look at the calendar quickly, again, just to give us some context on where we are practically. So I think this week and next, from what I can see, are standard schedule. We do have Hive Mind scheduled for tomorrow, but we don't have anything scheduled in the Hive Mind, but there are some things that we could. We've got mentorship meeting on Wednesday morning, and then the podcast with Andy Wednesday afternoon, Heartwork on Thursday. So this is actually kind of our light week now with the sort of the shifting schedule. And then next week, we have scheduled the coordination circle, outreach, principles and governance and legal, finance and legal. Plus we have a navigation session scheduled. So just in terms of what's already on the calendar, does anyone have anything that they want to add that's missing? Standard. We don't have any major events right now, although that is another thing that we can talk about, the next steps for the conversations, the 6 conversations. All right, so we pretty much, I think, are that provides us with our context. And now we'll go through the guild reports and quick updates on where things are, recent activity or action items or anything for the group to discuss. So from Artwork and Philosophy. You're muted.
We're meeting this week, and I tried starting a conversation about the book club via email, which hasn't taken, and I don't know if there's pointers on getting things happening in between the meetings. You know, there are discussions that we can be having where we're not trying to cram a lot in the meetings. So yeah, likely this week we'll be talking about the book group, book club, study group. It's still sort of a little amorphous in terms of its final format. Yep. And I don't know if there's anything. That's what I know as the caretaker. There's the subgroup for the lifeboat, the lifeboat circle, and the 6 conversations. So I don't know if there's any updates there, or if you want to do that in the outreach guild. So I will. That's I am done, and it's on to the next guild. Unless there's any comments or responses.
I think covering the 6 conversations with outreach makes sense because we had more of a conversation last week about it. But anything ready to move on? Thumbs up. All righty. And next up, principles and governance. We tried to meet last week, and I was the only person who showed up. So, and this is now, oh, maybe like the third in a row that was missed. And so that's actually something that I want to add to conversation for the circle is what do we want to do about that kind of lack of engagement around principles and governance. And other than that, there's nothing else to report. So questions or comments? Let's not get into that conversation yet, but
something to add to the conversation around it is it could also be a hive mind topic for this.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to throw that in there. I'm back to you.
Well, actually, I'm trying to multitask, and it's not a good idea right now. So finance and legal. We had a really good conversation. We had a good meeting on Friday. So just before the weekend, Steph attended, which was awesome. I think we debriefed the meeting with the lawyers, and also we debriefed a little bit the feedback that they have given us so far on the documents. I think the general gist was really good feeling about the lawyers, about the team. They seem to understand us and have deep experience, really impressive credentials. And the feedback so far was a bit on the challenging side, because it's the gap between what we seem to hope to want to do and what seems to be doable within the law is vast. So figuring out how to navigate that. So the next steps for us as a group we only just received the feedback from the lawyer on Thursday before the Friday meeting. So there's going to be a group review of the document, of the feedback. And the other thing is we all agreed to move forward with connecting Steph and Joey. And because Steph was there, it was really easy to be able to, so that's on our to-do list, is really kind of figuring out the just the logistics of making that happen. And so I think that's do you want to add anything, Roland?
Nope. I think that's good. Good job.
And it was very gratifying. I mean, I think we're kind of where the rubber hits the road now. So even though there's some challenges, I think we all have the same spirit, which is, both and figure out how to make it work. We're all willing to compromise. The lawyers, I think, have our back, and we'll figure out what we need. So yeah, it feels like there's really forward progress there. All right, farm and oops.
I did think of something else. There was also talk about Brad Smith and the
Right,
resilient
right.
communities, because one of the issues is the cost of having legal advice or help, and the resilient communities seems to be moving in the same direction and are at that stage. So there was talk of getting in touch with Brad Smith and the resilient communities to see if there would be a way, if what they're doing is close enough, and if it would make sense to pool resources, and have them join us in working with Bill and Elliot. That I just wanted to add that little bit. Back to you.
Cool. Yeah, good point. Any questions or comments before we move on? Okay. Farm, food, and housing. Milan, over to you.
We had a meeting. Did we have a meeting? No,
We were
already
supposed to, and we
reported.
didn't.
We
Yeah.
already reported. Oh, so I need to actually do a calendar
Mhm.
for that. Okay. So no, we didn't meet. And email has been sent out to a neighbor who would like to use the property again this year, and just waiting on a reply to that. It becomes an opportunity to collaborate. And little bits and pieces are being put together out on in the soil as opportunity and energy allows. So that's it for farm, food, and housing. Are there any questions or comments?
The one thing I want to add is we also, through Brad Smith, we made a connection with Jan Steinman, I think, and who came to the navigation session last week. So we got an opportunity to meet him in the context of the navigation session. And he had eco reality on Salt Spring. So was trying to do something very similar to what we're trying to do. You know, slightly different, obviously, but you know, it's his version of a lifeboat. And he's looking for another project now. There were basically health challenges in the family that caused them to have to step away from eco reality. And now that that is, you know, sort of in the past, he's looking for ways of getting involved again. So I just sent out an email this afternoon to the Farm Guild. I mean, I guess that's maybe a question I had as well. It's unclear exactly what Jan's role might be. Maybe he might become a farmer caretaker. He might be interested in getting involved in guilds, in other guilds. And so I wasn't sure, but yeah, so I wasn't sure what guild to channel this into. I was thinking because there seemed to be, he seemed to be on that exploring the farmer caretaker track, that it would go to the Farm Guild. But actually, that's an interesting process question. Should it, you know, should it come to the coordination circle actually before we send it somewhere?
I think
Or is that the kind of thing that can get channeled earlier?
no. I think you got it right there. I think we meet weekly. No, we meet bi-weekly now. Anyway, I think it is a coordination circle question, and this might actually also be what if we're meeting bi-weekly, or if something happens during the week, and something needs to be acted on, then what happens? Who's the caretaker for the coordination circle? Is it the governance guild, or is it the outreach guild? But I think you're right. In this situation, it would be to bring this to the coordination circle to figure out which guild would be best suited to respond.
I think this is let's put this on the agenda because I think this is worth actually talking through and
Okay.
gathering considerations. All right, so are we good on updates for the guild? And then that leaves outreach. And I guess I will do the notes because Ronnie, you couldn't make it, so I kind of was the substitute caretaker. And the big thing is at the previous meeting, we more or less talked through the 6 conversations. And so for the last meeting, there is, and actually I can do that. So what I did is I took the conversation that we had from the last circle and I basically just organized it a bit. So we now have a project plan for the 6 conversations. And we went through this at the meeting. So it's more or less writing everything down that we talked about. The big decisions were we did the poll, and Tuesday was the big winner for the time of the week for the meeting. 5 o'clock works for everyone. And we debated the every week or every other week. Interest was pretty much evenly divided. Like we had half in favor of weekly, half or a third. We had a third in favor of weekly, a third in favor of bi-weekly, and a third in the middle, and no one had really strong opinions. And I can't remember who proposed it, maybe Heather, but the idea was to start weekly, and it's easy to then, if that feels like it's too much, we can just on the fly make a decision to skip every other week. So it's kind of easy to start weekly, and then if we want to, we can push it out. And then the other part of that is there's the email out, and we can maybe use this time, Ronnie and April, to set a time when the three of us get together and flesh out the details. So that was the main chunk of the conversation. And shoot, I was there, but I can't remember that. We also spent some time talking about other stuff. I sent out the notes, and as soon as I sent out the notes, my brain, jettisoned the rest of the information. Oh, and we tabled going through the social media. So that's actually the website and social media plan. That's still in a future item.
And set up tasks for website review, right?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
also says connect Amir and Ben about Foodlands Network Circle.
Right. And that's I invited Heather to the outreach meeting specifically because of the Foodlands connection as like part of the network. And I'm going to be attending they have a network. So basically, Heather and I are the cooks through outreach, between outreach that Foodlands is doing and outreach that we are doing. So I'll be attending their circle on Wednesday. And yeah, so that's what that's about. We're co-linked.
Cool.
All right. Any questions, comments, or additions? Okay, that brings us to the guild reports. And so then in terms of agenda items, my apologies that I thought I had set this up ahead of time and I didn't. So I think we've got two things identified already. One is actually three things. So one was Roland's question about in between meeting engagement. What do we do about principles and governance, lack of engagement? Where do the requests like Jan go? So let's see how. And are there other issues? Let's go once around to see also if there's anything else that is on your radar for conversation today. April, anything to add to the list?
Nothing else. Pass to Roland.
I was thinking it's for single caretaker guilds that it would be useful for them to have a backup caretaker.
Well, everyone's supposed to have caretakers, but that's, I think, something else to,
Oh,
um,
I am fortunate enough that I have a co-caretaker in one of my guilds, and I don't know if I have in my other one that I'm caretaking. So uh, something to discuss with my guild.
I guess that's over to you, Ronnie.
Um, I guess sort of connected to the in-between meeting communications, I'm having my own thoughts, tensions, concerns about my engagement generally, and I have a lot going on in my life right now, and I don't know how much of that is relevant to talk about in this meeting or in my mentorship with Ben or what, but I have stuff that I want to give airtime and get support around. Um, yeah, so just putting that out there.
Actually, that reminds me because I was doing meeting cleanup um, and I tried to add things to the tension hopper as I was noting them. So things that we have in the hopper right now, what is the right time and frequency of the coordination circle? We started that conversation and we're kind of loosey-goosey right now about whether that should be weekly or bi-weekly. Process and meeting efficiency. And seasonal review. That's another topic. And how do we respond to the lack of active membership in governance? And I think this is sort of, it's how do we um, get the engagement level that we need to be able to move things forward. And then everything below that is going to be old stuff. So I think that covers it. Um, all right, so we have Hive Mind time scheduled tomorrow, which we've never activated the Hive Mind time, and we've got, let's say, 15 minutes today left in the coordination circle. So given that, let's go once around what feels like the priority topic. What's the best use of our remaining time is really the question. So April, over to you. What feels like the best use of time right now?
I think talking about the principles in government's lack of engagement is what I would choose. On to Roland.
Yeah, I could do that. I also think the how do in-between requests like Jan's get processed, I think would be a good thing to talk about also, because it is potentially one of the things that should actually come to the coordination circle to get parsed. And that was my understanding of one of the things that we did at the coordination circle. So that would be what I would add over to Ronnie.
I don't feel particularly biased toward any one of these. I think what's been suggested sounds good, and also acknowledging that I can't make the hive mind time tomorrow, which is also part of my tension of, yeah, a lot going on. Yeah, over to Ben.
Um, I like that. I'm wondering if we can like sort of quickly, I'm going to make a proposal. I'm I'm going to make a proposal around the seasonal review. And if it's a reasonable proposal, I think we can say, done on the seasonal review. And the proposal is basically hand it to the caretakers, and that as the caretaker of governance, there's already a protocol of what the seasonal review is supposed to cover. And basically sending that to the caretakers and saying, can you please figure out in your next meeting or two when, can you cover these questions? And if there's any confusion around how to do that, I'm available as a resource. But basically an email out to the caretakers with some of the questions that we're hoping to cover for the seasonal review, and then caretakers take it from there. Is that thumbs up? Any concerns or objections? All right, cool. Then that's done. And so let's talk about principles and governance. But I think there's a way in which all four of these are pretty connected, because they all have to do with how do we make it easy for people to engage and get the feedback we need when we need it. So I'm going to propose that we do gathering considerations. So we just keep going around the circle, one item at a time, contribution. We'll start with it nominally about, what do we do about the lack of engagement in principles and governance? But being gathering considerations, some of these might be relevant for the other points as well. So it's all fair. It's all part of, don't feel hemmed in if that doesn't muddy the waters. Anyhow, so gathering considerations, what do we do about engagement in principles and governance, and engagement more generally? So concerns, ideas, things to keep in mind. April, over to you.
I'd be interested in knowing about any connections that have happened around principles and governance. How many people have ever attended? How many, how many have indicated interest for the future? And how many people engage with the other guilds? Is this the only guild where there's lack of engagement, and what the nature of that is, I would say, and would also, am I supposed to be doing one thing at a time?
Yes.
Over to Roland.
I am wondering if, given the number of people that the way that this is an opportunity for doing some reflecting on the way that we've divided up the guilds. And is it necessary to have a principles and governance guild, or can the driver statement or the tasks that are associated with this guild be parsed out to some of the other guilds, and it as an individual guild be discontinued? So that is as an alternative to trying to get engagement in the guild, is looking at what are the functions of the guild, and can we at this point reorganize the guilds, that. Over to Ronnie.
Yeah, I was thinking something similar to what Roland said. And when we had the charrette and then we said, these are the guilds, this is what we're doing now. And then if things need to change based on the information that we get and the reflection that we do, then they can change. And so I think it's interesting information that the engagement has been low. And I'm curious how, basically what Roland said, how the goal of that guild, the goals of the guild, or the energy of the guild could be, how is it already showing up in other places, potentially in other guilds, and how could it be integrated in a way so that we don't necessarily have to have that guild, but we're still tending to the aspects of the guild that we have deemed important. Over to Ben.
Well, I mean, I think it has to do in terms of one point. I am a bit resistant to folding it into the other guilds because I think what will happen is it won't happen. And I think that it's some, especially because the main role here is supposed to be onboarding and bringing people up to speed. And that's all, and and I think we've already experienced some of the challenge of when people are getting onboarded into a guild, there's all of this combined stuff, like that. I mean, anyhow, I'm resistant to the idea of disbanding it and parsing it out to the other guilds, because my concern would be that it would get lost in, what other people are doing. I do think it is interesting that the engagement has been low here, because in some ways, so, kind of have two pools of volunteers that are straddling, one pool is straddling uh, artwork and outreach. And there's this, it's kind of even hard to figure out where the line is there. And then one finance and legal. And no one is really showing up for the governance part, which is not entirely surprising. People have shown up. We did have people at the first meetings, and some, people expressing interest, but it's low. And a number of the people that expressed interest, it was as there's some of the kind of distant people who are thinking more about their own lifeboat and kind of wanted the fly on the wall perspective of the principles and governance. So yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that. I think the underlying question is also really how do we get more people engaged and get those people who are engaged more actively engaged. So over to you, April.
Yeah, I am loath as well to roll this in with something else. I believe that guild is one of the main big strategic drivers of this whole thing. And that if things are not dealt with there, that belong there, that other stuff will unravel, is my feeling about it. And I think governance is incredibly important. And if we're interested in developing democracies or more democratic ways of being, this is an area where that work needs to happen. Now, I'm also the guy that said I was real interested in the Principles and Governance Guild, and I think I attended one meeting. I don't remember. It's beyond my capacity to do more than one guild at the moment, which doesn't mean that I couldn't be deeply engaged at sometimes, but not right now. It's not going to happen for time reasons, but I still think it's incredibly important. And if my heart wasn't involved so deeply with heart work, I'd be bouncing over to principles and governance for sure. Over to Roulette.
Oh, this could also be a coordinator task. Oh, what am I thinking about? I am thinking about ways in which a very wise person has told me that you can get people engaged. It is not to ask them to join a committee, but to ask for help on specific tasks. So that could be a way of building engagement so that it doesn't feel quite so monumental of like, oh, I've got to go to another meeting. Um, and uh, so are there specific tasks that the coordinators here, the coordinators of all the guilds could bring to their meetings to get people to help where help is needed or active where activity is needed? Over to Ronnie.
I'm kind of feeling like this is connected to a bigger tension or a more encompassing tension around engagement. Because I feel like we have had meetings in various guilds where we have asked for people to do specific things, and it ends up falling on the same people who've been doing these things for a long time. And so I'm I'm wondering about engagement. I'm wondering about engagement for myself too, and sort of how everything fits together and how things are currently structured. I don't think I wouldn't say that I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm this seems to be a tension. It's like we haven't yet recruited people who are like, yes, I will also be a caretaker of this guild and I will take on this work. So I'm curious why that is. And if we could do some reflection around that, not necessarily right now, but as part of a seasonal review, perhaps. Over to Ben.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it is, well, and then I come back to the same sorts of questions, is it a critical mass thing? Is it a sequencing thing? And it is one of the challenges in, when we talked about what it isn't, um, it's not a place that tells you what to do. It's not business as usual. And those make it the onboarding challenging. Um, and in that spirit, I have been thinking lately about actually upping the challenge. And there's two parts to it. One is getting people to declare. Well, and the other thing too, we may be jumping the gun, because part of the 6 conversations is a conversation about commitment.
Yeah.
And there's a conversation about gifts, and there's a conversation around, what it means to be in this mutual benefit. And so I think, the short form of what I want to put in there is, I think something about making it more explicit. Like,
Yeah.
what are the badges you want to earn, and what are you signing up for? Like, actually, how many hours a week are you willing to, an hour a week, an hour a month? What is it that, and are you willing to take on tasks, and what kind of tasks? And kind of just being more upfront about it, more explicit
Yeah.
of asking the question. Over to you, April.
Yeah, I like the explicitness. And I also think this is almost a second order guild, in that once people figure out how to do guild work a little bit, and once they start seeing what's happening around them, then it's like the aha will pop up. Over to Roland.
Just before I go into my comment, just a note about time. And I like the idea about the 6 conversations being an important thing to do. And I like the idea of working out a way of being able to have an ask as part of the 6 conversations without being tricky about it. or without it, I don't know how, so it's just, how do we do it so that it doesn't feel like a recruitment campaign? Um, because my understanding is that the 6 conversations is primarily for guild members and is also open. This first round of them anyway is open to everyone. So over to Ronnie.
I'm actually feeling like the 6 conversations now is really well timed because we can use the conversations to explore all of these tensions and these
Yeah.
and really think about the why of all of this. And I just wanted to share a reflection. So in my housing co-op, they have this 5-year plan that's very much a building a lifeboat plan. And they're really struggling to get new members to get involved. And I had this epiphany or epiphanet the other day where I was like, I realized I was like, people aren't seeing themselves in the plan. And so they're not feeling motivated to get involved. And so that's just a light bulb that's kind of been going off repeatedly in my head of like, how do we see ourselves in the lifeboat? And how can other people see themselves, or how are they not seeing themselves yet? And what is that? But that's for me, I feel like there's that intrinsic motivation to do something when you see your own path. And I think that is deeply connected to like the personal development plan and the badges, but really what is the deep why for people to get involved? Um, I think that's really important. Over to Ben.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with a lot of things. I think, Roland, I like your point. And I think it's also, it is, actually, I'm agreeing with everyone's point. I think April, yeah, there's something about it takes people kind of wandering around a little. I think because to be able to see your own deep why, you have to kind of struggle with the why a little bit. That's part of, you can't just have somebody hand you, here's your involvement. And at the same time, I think we can make that clearer. And Rolanda and I have had a lot of these conversations where we keep getting these questions about, I don't understand, blah, blah, blah. I don't understand, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, that's not my job. I've actually been thinking about coming back to the agreement of listen first for understanding is like, well, you have to understand it for yourself. I can answer questions, but I can't get you to understand, and I think that that's part of, but how do we do that more gracefully, right? How do we do that in a way that isn't like, well, you're on your own,
Yeah.
let me know when you work that out. But there is an element, and I think that, when we think about the non-traditional education part of it, it is learning to unlearn to relearn. And the learning to unlearn part throws a lot of people. And yeah, well, and actually, and maybe that means there's 2 parts here. I'm just putting this out as I'm not attached to it, but would it be helpful if we thought about the difference between finding Lifeboat Academy faculty and finding Lifeboat Academy students? That there's a couple different
Yeah.
qualities that we're looking for. And so when we're asking people what kind of commitment, it looks different if you're a student than if you're a faculty member. So anyhow, over to you, April. And I guess, are we, just in the interest of time, can we start to, how can we tie a bow in this conversation? Over to you, April.
Um, I think I'm lost, so I'm passing to my colleague Roland, hoping that he finds me.
Well, and actually, that's a really interesting thing. I can't help you because I don't know how you're lost, and it comes back to the whole thing about uh, well, it's sort of so in how can people see themselves in this? I was actually really hoping that some of the new people coming in would be able to shed some light on what's missing, and because I don't know. I think that we've been trying to answer this question for a long time, and um, for myself, I feel like I've hit my limit of ways of being able to do it for them. And so what I've been trying to do is um, I've been trying to put the onus back on them. I guess what Ben was saying about I can't tell you what it is until I know what questions you have about it. And I got a couple of questions like that, and I tried to find where the answer was in the material that we already have. I mean, we're always making the joke of we've got it written down somewhere. Well, God damn it, why not use it? So I've been trying to find materials and putting it sending it to say this is what we've got, because really getting feedback on the materials that we do have, if it doesn't answer the question, then how can we better answer the question, and and what answers might come from actually doing that. Uh, and then there's also the question of sometimes, because we're proposing something that is challenging, this is not business as usual. Is it just that the person who's asking the question isn't ready to hear? Sometimes when you're not ready to hear, you just don't hear the answer, or you can't understand the answer because you don't want to understand it. And so that's a whole other thing that we don't really have any control over. So what is which one where? Please, there, there. That's my question, Ronnie. What's the answer?
What is which one where? That let me tell you. Um, yes. And I'm not trying to put the six conversations on a pedestal. However, I do feel like this is an opportunity to do something different
Yeah.
that also is still weaving in so much that we've already been doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's really smart. I think that's really agile.
Yeah.
And I really, what Ben said about, I think it was Ben said, people need to struggle with the why, and that's what emergent spaces are for. They are for people to discover for themselves their own questions and their own curiosity and their own resistance, their own grief, their own um, beliefs, all of these kinds of things. And I think that maybe the lifeboat circles, as we were doing them before, it wasn't enough. It was just a little taste. But to have this ongoing series to show up, to make the commitment to be in a container with the same people or similar people, really gives the chance to go deep. And then as we wrap up and towards the end, we can say, here, what questions have you discovered for yourself? And here are some ways that we can continue to support you as you move through those questions. Um, and things like navigation sessions and mentoring and the help desk, these are all ways to continue those relationships. Because it has been feeling like we have so much to offer. Why are people not taking us up on it? And it's like, well, they need, in a way, it's more hand holding, and in a way, it's also less hand holding, if that makes sense. But providing the space for people to really grapple with what it is for them, I think is going to be really great. And I mean, at least for myself, I'm really looking forward to it. So over to Ben.
Yeah, I agree. And it is I'm continuing to try to anchor in the things happen on their own schedule. And if you follow the process, Ronnie talking about the 6 conversations seeming to land at a very fortuitous time, and in part because we've just created the space to say, well, what makes sense, and engaging people in the conversation. And I think that there is, one of the other things, this also might be part of that convergence. One of the things that was happening in the Finance and Legal Guild, based on the feedback that we're getting from the lawyers, one thing is we know, how do I want to say this? There are some phrases like, talking to Joey, it became really clear the minute you say the word investor, people are going to make all sorts of assumptions about, well, of course you're going to make a profit, a financial profit. And it doesn't matter that we say your profit is going to come, in the form of social benefit. That we've lost already, because we've started this frame of, oh, they're investors and they're owners and therefore they get special perks. And then you're spending all your time fighting against that. And so, actually switching the language, I'm willing to let go of my darlings and talking about nonprofit, talking about this as this is an educational, venture. Maybe using like an artificially, you know, as a student at the Lifeboat Academy, you can sign up for these courses. You can earn these badges. And, and we've talked about this before at High Grove in terms of onboarding. It's a lot better to start, you show up on time, you do your chores, these are the rules. And even, and not start with, we co-create our reality here. You start with, this is how it works. And part of how it works is you get to co-create this, but we're not going to tell you that part yet, or, anyhow, I think there's something about how, and maybe it's coyote principle, it's part of the trickster principle, that we actually might get people more willing to step into the uncomfortable emergent space if we give them something that seems like a more narrow framework to start with. Anyhow, I think these are all really cool ideas, and I feel like in terms of next steps or actions to take from it, actually sounds like keep on keeping on, like push forward with the 6 conversations, keep this in mind as we're going, like Roland's saying, making sure that there's an ask, that there's a clear channel. But I don't know that there's anything else that we need to do about this. So that's how I'm feeling. April, over to you.
Well, I'm realizing in all this conversation, I mean, my day job is in engagement. And I haven't thought through how I would use what I know that works there to this situation. So that's something that I can do. I haven't taken it seriously. I mean, I take the whole thing seriously, but I haven't looked at that aspect and taken it seriously or thought it through. So that's something that I can do, and I can do that. I've got enough time to do that. I don't always have time to get to meetings, or to get to meetings at particular times because of other time demands, but I can think through engagement. And I want to propose that I start the Coyote Club, and that we use the trickster principle as the flag that we fly for that. And I'll design a nice badge as well. And we could maybe slip it under one of the guilds if we wanted to, or we can just do it. We can be subterranean coyotes. But to think more about that, and to think about, okay, what engages me, what engages the guy down the road, how come that guy over there doesn't seem interested in what I'm doing? And even though I, act really nice when I see him and fly the flag, he still doesn't get it. So I need to think through some of that. That's just on my horizon at this minute. Over to Roland.
That sounds really great, and I suggest that it nestled in one of the guilds. So the coordination circle is where the coordinators talk. So how and I'm just reading here, how can we bring April's experience with engagement to the Lifeboat Academy? So which guild does that go in? It kind of sounds like it's hard worky stuff, but it could also be principles and governance
And outreach.
and outreach. Uh, oh yeah. So there we go. Which and we don't need to answer that right now, but I think it's something that just to have a space where that can be discussed.
Yeah.
Which guild would it go under? Over to Ronnie.
Yeah, it's interesting that this question about engagement, it feels equal parts. It's the equal parts inner work and outer work, the relationships with ourselves and the relationships with each other. How are we showing up for ourselves is how also we show up for each other. And so it is the both and, which I think it's a big strength that we are able to name that and talk about it in the ways that we do. Um, but yeah, I don't think I actually have anything else to add. I will say I'm really looking forward to talking about the 6 conversations specifically and how all that's gonna unfold. Back to you, Ben.
Yeah, me too. And April, if we could pin you down on a time, Ronnie. Oh, thank you. I just checked this. I could not come up with the spelling of onus. So anyhow, April, if we could pin you down on a time, Ronnie proposed tomorrow or Thursday. Is that right? Tomorrow before 5 and Thursday.
I need to revise my times because
Okay.
things keep changing.
Oh,
I'm
right. So
sorry.
let's
Why don't you do that handy little scheduling thing that
Okay.
Ronnie
there's
found?
only 3 of us. Let's just look at the calendar and pick a date. So
Okay.
so we'll do that as a last step. And the other thing too that I'm kind of pulling from this is I think as part of that seasonal review for the guilds, or maybe actually maybe it's a both and. I think for the guilds to actually start thinking about how do we know when to hand things off from one guild to the other? Because we knew there was going to be an overlap and we knew there was going to be interconnection. But it's not efficient if we have 2 guilds that are basically doing the same stuff. So, how do we figure out where there can be some handoffs and, does outreach really focus on enticing people in, and then heart work focuses on deepening the conversation? Is that sort of like, how do you get them to come in the store, and then how do you get them to buy, I don't want to make it too mercantile, but how do we divide up the tasks so that it works? um Anyhow, I'm feeling like, other than scheduling the time, I'm feeling good and complete. Does that work for everybody else? All right, cool. Well, with that, then I'm going to stop the recording but stay on the Zoom call, and then we can pick a time. Bye.
I don't need to stay, so I'm gonna go. Bye.
Bye.